Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this session of IETA Live Carbon Markets. IETA Live is our public webinar series. So for those of you in attendance today who aren't familiar with IETA, we are an international multi-sectoral business association dedicated to facilitating the optimization of carbon markets. We have hundreds of members all over the world, and we host climate summits in every region of the world every year. A lot of our working groups and special initiatives are limited to our members, but IETA Live is one of our public offerings that allows us to be a part of the public dialogue, give everyone a sneak peek of what we do at IETA, and share the stage with thought leaders from different parts of the market. So if anyone in attendance today is not familiar with IETA and is interested in joining the membership, we encourage you to look into the details at ieta.org. IETA Live, we host approximately every 2 or 3 months. We had 6 last year, so this is the first of this year. It will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. So if after the fact you want to share the recording with any of your colleagues, you'll be able to find it on our events page on the IETA website. Well, we're very excited about today's list of speakers, so special thanks to our expert panel, who we'll hear from shortly. As you can see, starting with a brief introduction, we'll hear from our speakers at CarbonAi, Planet Labs, Pachama, Abatable, and CNaught, and we will wrap today's session with 15 or 20 minutes of Q&A before we complete the webinar. So my name is Kyle Lynch. I'm a policy analyst with IETA. I support our digital working group. Some of you may also know me from our legal working group. And I was formerly involved in the launch of Climate Action Data Trust, which was an IETA collaboration with the World Bank Climate Warehouse and the National Climate Change Secretariat in the Singapore Prime Minister's Office. On to the subject of today, leveraging AI for the future of carbon markets. Obviously, artificial intelligence usage is still in its infancy for the average person. It's something that surrounds us so much more and more every day in our daily lives. But one thing is clear to everyone who uses it, it continues to develop and become more sophisticated at a very rapid pace. The use of AI in carbon markets today is certainly different than what it will look like in a few years. And everyone in the market has different sentiments about how AI should be used and where the scope begins and ends. I would also say that those feelings will probably evolve as advancements continue to be made to AI tools. So in the IETA Digital Working Group, we're currently working on developing a vision paper to explore what a digitally transformed market could look like. And one of the key enablers of that transformation that we look to is AI. So we expect the role to grow over time, especially as the market becomes more digitalized. Today, we're covering different stages of the carbon credit value chain and how AI is already being used in Earth observation, geospatial machine learning, predictive modeling to forecast project performance, and helping buyers identify and purchase high-integrity carbon credits. And once we've heard from each of our speakers for a few minutes, we will save 15 or 20 minutes at the end for an audience Q&A. So throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please use that Q&A function to post your questions, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end. If you have logistical questions along the way, you're welcome to put those in the chat. But I think without any further delay, we would like to hear from our panel of experts. So we are starting in Calgary with our friend Ryan from CarbonAi. And I just want to say CarbonAi is a rock star in the IETA membership. They're heavily involved in the past in our organization of North America Climate Summit. And Ryan's colleague, Kelly Parker, is actually our co-chair in the digital working group. So we are thrilled to have Ryan with us. Ryan, over to you maybe for a quick intro, and then if you want to get into it. Thanks. Ryan, are you with us?
Thanks, Kyle. My mute was on. Thanks, Kyle and the team at IETA for putting together another important session. My name's Ryan Arsenault. I'm the CEO and co-founder at CarbonAi. We're based out of Calgary. We've got a large presence uh, in North America and African and Asian markets. So I think we'll just jump right into it. Kyle, we can go to the next slide. Thanks. So I think it's important when we talk about AI that we start with a general overview on where AI is today in general markets and for the public, and how that applies and the key challenges and threats that we see in the markets related specifically to transition finance and carbon. So the first thing we talk about is at CarbonAi is data integrity. AI is only as good as the inputs that go into it. Carbon markets have struggled with fragmented and unverifiable data for quite some time, making it difficult to ensure that credits or attributes truly represent the real emissions reductions. And a lot of progress has been made over the last couple of years in those spaces. That's why robust digital MRV monitoring, reporting, and verification systems like CarbonAi's platform, we believe are essential to advancing this market forward. To understand the importance of data integrity, we like to, and its role with AI, we think it's important that some foundational elements of what AI is and how it functions are understood. So we consider how large language models and predictive AI systems function in platforms and in markets. That approach can introduce risk with AI error or what's commonly known as AI hallucinations, instances where artificial intelligence fabricates information that appears to be credible but could be incorrect. Large language models are essentially predictive autocomplete mechanisms. They generate responses based on historical language patterns, not true comprehension like human beings have. The same principle applies to AI models in carbon markets. Without structured and auditable data sets, AI risks reinforce errors rather than solving them. This happens because large language models prioritize statistical probability over factual accuracy. What that means is they can generate misleading outputs when gaps exist in the trained data model. Unexpected results or hallucinations in carbon credit modeling could lead to overcrediting and incorrect risk assessments. That can highlight the need for strict data verification processes. Query structure is also really important. So how our systems or human beings interact with the model is really, really important. How AI is asked a question can yield vastly different results, reinforcing the need for standardized data governance. Another challenge is black box AI. And I think everybody that uses AI on a daily basis asks themselves these questions. So black box AI is generally models that provide results without transparency. You don't really know in a lot of cases, especially in the emerging AI industry, where the information's coming from. In our markets, regulators and stakeholders must be able to verify AI-driven credit calculations, risk assessments, et cetera. So explainable AI is critical for trust and adoption. It kind of moves us on to the market basis and manipulation risks. We've all seen in the last year that there's been downward market pressure in both voluntary and compliance markets. And we believe at the core of that is data integrity, and the credibility of carbon markets has suffered due to cases of overcrediting and data integrity concerns. If AI is deployed recklessly or without oversight, it could worsen these issues rather than solve them. We think that ensuring AI models relying on traceable and verified data sets rather than or including outdated and unverifiable reports or content is key to reinforcing market confidence. Market manipulation and cybersecurity are something that we talk about here regularly. AI models trained on unbiased or incomplete data can distort credit pricing. With AI automated processes, bad actors could exploit vulnerabilities to generate fraudulent credits or misrepresent reductions. We believe that role-based governance is critical here. We think that the emerging system needs immutable traceability, such as verified hash approaches through the data chain and the life cycle to lock in credibility and prevent tampering. When paired with role-based governance, AI can be built on trusted data sources, ensuring only authenticated entities contribute to emissions tracking data and credit issuance. Verified hashing, for those that are familiar with that terminology, is the structure in which data, when promoted onto ledger, has traceability and immutability back to its primary data sources. So if AI is trained with immutability on high integrity data sets, this turns AI from a liability into an asset. Finally, regulation. This is an emerging space, I think, across all AI-driven markets. AI-specific governance in carbon markets is lacking, not because of a lack of effort, just because of the speed with it's being introduced. Without proactive engagement with regulators, we risk fragmented policies on a macro market scale that could stifle innovation. We believe that we must help shape AI standards across markets to scale its positive impact. Kyle, if you can go to the next slide, please. So now the good news. That's the challenging side. So we like to focus on the opportunities as opposed to the challenges. AI offers massive opportunities to enhance the integrity, scalability, and efficiency of carbon markets and transition finance. AI can assist carbon credit integrity or environmental attribute integrity by analyzing governed information sources such as verified satellite data, IoT sensor integration, and authenticated field reports. AI can be used to track performance in real time with greater accuracy and efficiency, and more quickly identifying anomalies in information. CarbonAi's driven DMRV platform is already streamlining project onboarding and project performance with measurable impact for our clients. We have significantly advanced our AI-driven data modeling for a number of project types, including methane mitigation, our projects in real-time methane intensity reporting with provenance through to the financial networks like Canton's integration, and our CarbonAi Spark Improved Cooking program leverage AI to deliver higher integrity environmental attributes. We believe that is the key to scaling transition finance. True macro AI models that generalize across financial markets are only viable when built on large, high-integrity data sets. We are currently what we call phase one at CarbonAi, which is the project-specific AI phase, where models are tailored to individual programs with auditable, traceable data. This ensures that our AI outputs remain accurate and verifiable. Once these data sets reach sufficient scale and diversity, we think that macro AI will become more feasible, enabling broader predictive capabilities and automation throughout the credit value chain. This mirrors how large language models or LLMs function. Their predictions rely entirely on past interactions. So without high-quality structured data, their outputs can be inconsistent. Similarly, AI models trained on weak data sets will produce unreliable conclusions, and this underscores why we prioritize verifiable, structured, and transparent data outputs. Another major opportunity is transition finance. Integrity-based AI-powered risk assessments, like some of the people on our panel are going to talk about, can provide greater certainty to institutional investors, accelerating capital deployment. One of our examples at CarbonAi is a partnership we had in West Africa last year with Point Source with Standard Chartered, where we used AI to enable real-time or to bolster real-time tracking of methane intensity overlaid on production information for transparent emissions profiles that aligns with regulatory criteria emerging in Europe and investor sustainability goals. AI is also enabling digital-first carbon markets. We were involved with a number of IETA market members on digital pilots, and we're seeing manual verification processes that were too slow are being deployed using AI-powered automation to support project onboarding, support verifications, and in the future, we believe will be credit issuance at scale. To wrap up, where do we go from here? We think at CarbonAi that artificial intelligence must be trained on role-governed, reliable, traceable, and audible data sets. That's how we move away from black box AI and toward AI as a trusted building tool. We need to be responsible about how AI is applied in carbon markets and transition finance. It should be transparent, auditable, and interoperable, not a box that introduces risks. At the end of the day, AI isn't just about automation. It's about unlocking trust, efficiency, and scale in our markets. We believe that by focusing on integrity and transparency, we can ensure that AI becomes a force for progress. With that, I'll pass it back over to Kyle. Thanks for my time.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's really helpful, I think, to provide a little bit of a framework. I know that it will help the audience contextualize what we hear about from our coming speakers. So thanks, and we'll come back to you at the Q&A. We're very excited to hear from our next speaker, David, who's joining us from Planet Labs. Well, I could give you a bit of more of an introduction, David, but maybe I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, sounds good. Go next slide, please. Great. Thanks, Kyle. And thanks everyone for attending today. I am David Marvin. I'm the product lead for the Forest Ecosystems team at Planet. For those of you who don't know, Planet is a Earth observation company. We build and operate a large constellation of satellites that is able to image the entire Earth every single day, and have been doing so for the last 8 or so years. And my background is in forest ecology. I have a PhD in ecology, and my expertise lies at the intersection between ecology, remote sensing, and AI. And I started a company about 6 years ago that Planet acquired 2 years ago to be able to build the data layers I'm talking about today, which is a global system to be able to monitor forests. And it's purpose-built for forest carbon project monitoring and assessment. Go to the next slide, please. So before I get into some of the details on how we do this, let's talk about what the data actually is. We are taking satellite imagery and transforming it into useful quantitative information on forest structure and carbon. And this comes down to 3 main data layers: canopy cover, canopy height, and above ground carbon. Each of these are pixel-based raster data sets. And so they're quantitative values, say for cover, 0 to 100%, height 0 to n meters, and above ground carbon 0 to n tons per hectare. And this is provided globally over all forested areas of the world. Next slide. And they're provided as 2 different but very related products. Each product has the same set of data layers that I just talked about, but one of them we call forest carbon monitoring. This is 3-meter resolution. It's updated on a quarterly basis and has archived back to 2021. It's most useful for, as the name says, monitoring forest projects. Once you have a project underway, a discrete kind of parcel of land, you can use this information to understand the structure and the carbon and how that changes 4 times per year and back to the last 5 years over time. And so this is really key information to map out at the nearly individual tree level what's occurring within these projects, trying to bring more transparency and trust back to the system. Next. We also provide the visual underlying data from our PlanetScope constellation of satellites to be able to understand kind of visually what's happening beyond just what you see as the output from our modeling processes. Next slide. Separately, we have a product called Forest Carbon Diligence. Same data layers cover carbon, but they're 30-meter resolution. They're updated annually and has a longer archive going back 11 years to 2013. And so we think about these as used in concert, where the diligence would be used to kind of do project-based and area-based assessments, build project baselines, and understand kind of the regional changes and stocks of carbon over larger areas beyond kind of the project bounds. And then once a project is underway, moving into kind of the monitoring phase, switching over to that forest carbon monitoring data set is kind of how we think about these two products being used together. So I'll talk a bit about how we actually produce this, given this is an AI seminar. So what we've done is, over the last 5 years, have collected what we think is the world's largest repository of airborne LiDAR. We have around 14 million square kilometers we've collected from countries all over the world. This basically represents probably the most available public data on airborne LiDAR. We know there's lots of private data sets that are, locked away in, corporations or, even government agencies that don't permit public use of the data. So there are more data out there, but we've sourced as much as we possibly can to provide what we think is a fairly unbiased, training data set to be able to build these models. It represents almost every, main forested biome in the world. Represents a really great latitudinal gradient of forests and ecosystems as well, and is the main input to build our canopy cover and canopy height models. And so we take satellite imagery, pair that with the airborne LiDAR samples, and use deep learning processes to train these models for height and for cover. Once those models are trained, we achieve about 80% accuracy in each of these. We then apply it to the entire world, and then we take spaceborne JEDI measurements of forest above ground carbon and use that with the canopy height and canopy cover samples as an input to a different model that's able to produce our above ground live carbon. That's a far more unbiased estimate because of the global nature of both JEDI, and we also use ISAT-2 samples as well for northern latitudes to provide kind of full coverage of above ground live carbon into that model. Next slide. There we go. Oh, looks like there we go. So we think that this transparent, high quality, regularly updated scientific data on deforestation and carbon storage are essential to bring reliability and trust back to carbon projects and markets, whether they're voluntary or jurisdictional, or whether a carbon project generates offsets or simply meant to store more carbon to help mitigate climate change. Next. We think that forest carbon monitoring in particular marks the beginning of a new era for operational forest monitoring. And we look forward to supporting the wide array of government, commercial, and nonprofit organizations that are working on building this next generation of natural climate solutions. Next. And so what you're seeing here is kind of a range of different locations and forest types from all over the world, highlighting not just the scale at which this product is produced, 103 million square kilometers around the world, but the fine details that can be resolved with a data set at 3-meter resolution. Next. Data at this quality, resolution, and update frequency are just not available elsewhere. There are plenty of free and open data sources on forests, but they're not purpose-built for forest project monitoring and management. Forest data you might find on locations like Global Forest Watch, which is an incredible product and an incredible set of data. They often just provide kind of information that's a little too coarse and often locally inaccurate. And so they may be suitable for kind of rough, large-scale stocktake assessments and have been used in a powerful way in the past for doing so, but they're not really sufficient for bringing the trust and transparency down to the forest carbon project level. Next. So we believe the power of this quarterly 3-meter resolution data truly lies in detecting more complex diffuse phenomena like degradation and next reforestation as well. Not all forest loss is uniform, making it crucial to map selective harvest of individual or small groups of trees. And losing these large, valuable trees can contribute a significant loss of carbon. So tools to track deforestation need to deliver that fine scale resolution to accurately account for carbon loss from this kind of degradation, especially in REDD+ projects. And on the right side, you can see being able to track the fine scale detail of regrowth in ARR projects. Happy to take more questions at the end and appreciate the time here.
David, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Well, we're getting ready to hear next from our friend Diego at Pachama, and Pachama does work in geospatial machine learning that's not super dissimilar from Planet Labs, but they do occupy a bit of a different niche in the carbon market. So, Diego, maybe I'll pass to you now if you want to briefly introduce yourself. And are you with us?
Yeah, thank you, Kyle, and thank you for having me. And yes, as you said, we do work on the space of geospatial AI. And I didn't bring slides, but I'm hoping to explain the work that Pachama does and how we are so excited about the intersection of geospatial and machine learning to really transform how carbon markets are going to work, especially in nature-based or land-based carbon markets. Pachama is a 7-year-old startup, started with the insight that we need to radically scale the flow of capital to nature-based carbon projects if we are to solve climate change. And the only way to do that is to do it by enhancing trust, by ensuring integrity on claims, and by really making it easy to scale projects on the ground. So what Pachama has been doing is building models that can automate some of the data packages that are needed to certify issue credits from a nature-based carbon project, and for companies to diligence and verify that these projects are effectively having the impact that they claim. And as of today, we have evaluated over 200 projects, including REDD+ projects that are conserving tropical forest around the world, IFM projects that are increasing the carbon stocking in boreal forest or elsewhere. And more recently, we put a special focus on reforestation and agroforestry projects that are starting whole new forests, where you need to really evaluate the suitability of the land and to predict what is the future carbon that is going to be sequestered by these restoration efforts. So to do that, we have built a series of machine learning models that combine a lot of different data sets: satellite optical imagery, LiDAR data, and field plot data that is used as ground truth to improve the accuracy of these models. So similarly to Planet, we have also built a canopy height map, trained on JEDI data, which is a LiDAR device on the International Space Station that gives you, the height of the trees and the topography of the terrain around the world. And we have combined also that with aerial LiDAR and ground data. And another innovation that we brought to the market a few years ago was the idea of a control area-based dynamic baseline, where for a specific area of interest, an algorithm can go 100 kilometers around it and select the pixels that are more relevant as a reference to the area of interest, including considerations such as slope, vegetation type, closeness to roads and rivers, historical land use, and so forth and so on. And then with that, you can actually determine what is the business as usual baseline of a given area, which is critical for both conservation and restoration as well, right? You want to know that the activities that the projects are doing are effectively creating additional carbon that wasn't going to happen without that intervention. So we built that algorithm. We recently publish a paper explaining how we build that algorithm and how we validate the result of this algorithm. We're hoping that that more people adopt things like that. In fact, it has been accepted by several methodologies. The idea of a dynamic baseline that can also, over time, get new information. Historically, baselines were set and then revisited only 10 years later. But of course, we live in a highly dynamic world where the prices of commodities or new politicians can change what is expected to happen on the land. And again, geospatial and AI allows us to rerun these models in a very rapid and efficient way. Another model that we built is a model to calculate algorithmically the leakage of a project, right? The concept of leakage, is something that is tricky in nature-based carbon projects, but it basically means that you're going to be pushing the activity on that land somewhere else, and that might cause emissions somewhere else. So you really need to consider what is that activity, right? So we built an algorithm that considers economic use of the land, and then calculates what is the expected risk, and then what is the discount that you need to apply to your carbon accounting. And then, similarly to Planet, we also have a monitoring model where we are able to track projects, and we think it is critical to be able to track on an ongoing basis, both for projects but also for the backers of those projects, investors and carbon credits buyers or off-takers on those projects, right? So that you can report. And of course, we all know that nothing is perfect, right? We like to say that forests fail a lot less than startups fail, but they do fail. Things can go wrong in the land, but what you want to be able is to react quickly, right? To go and correct or act in the face of deforestation risk, in the face of plant diseases and so forth. So all those models come together at Pachama to help companies source, diligence, transact, and track nature-based carbon projects. An example of the work we do is we recently partnered with the Symbiosis Coalition, which is the largest advanced market commitment for reforestation, nature-based carbon removal projects in the world, Google, Microsoft, Meta, and Salesforce. And we helped them run an RFP, and we got countless proposals from around the world, and we helped produce the data that is going to empower those corporates to screen the projects, select which projects they want to invest on. And then we also have been working with projects themselves to help them complete their data packages needed to get a project from an initial assessment to a design phase and to financing phase, when you critically need to be able to demonstrate that a project can deliver the economics that investors expect. And in that sense, these machine learning models can save a lot of time and deliver, pretty accurate predictions that then can be used by investors to deploy capital in these projects. So for the long term, we believe that geospatial AI will radically transform how carbon credit projects are designed and certified, monitored, financed, and this should bring the credibility that is needed so much in this market, so that we can actually have the impact that this market is expected to have. Another model that I forgot to mention is land suitability. As I said, it's very important that you select the land correctly, that the right trees are planted in the right land. And we built a tool that allows you to go and just search for land and immediately know whether the land is compliant with methodologies. All these models are attuned to the methodologies by the major registries and by new emerging registries. So a lot of the work that we've been doing is marrying the work of brilliant machine learning engineers and forest carbon scientists with carbon policy experts that are on top of the latest methodologies. and also working with the standard bodies to help them understand and evolve their methodologies with these new technologies. So overall, while I think that there's always going to be humans on the loop in this market, I do think that there can be amazing automation that can allow for rapid scalability of nature-based carbon solutions. So with that, back to you, Kyle.
Diego, thank you so much for that intervention. That's very interesting. We're looking forward to hearing from you some more in the Q&A. Just on that, to our audience members, don't be afraid to use that Q&A function, and we will circle back around to the questions a little bit later. Just to pivot again, we're going to be hearing from Maria at Abatable. And Maria, I know some of those opening comments from Ryan about the use of large language models and stuff got me thinking about sort of the charge that you're leading at Abatable. So if you don't mind, just a quick intro, and then, yeah, we'd love to hear more.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Cal, and everyone at the IETA team to organize such an important forum. Very quickly about myself, I'm Maria Fomanovic. I'm one of the co-founders of Abatable. What we do at Abatable is predominantly trying to build a transaction infrastructure and data intelligence solutions for the VCM. So the main thing we work on is predominantly supporting corporate buyers in providing them with an RFP solution tool. So the way it works is we get buyers come to us, codify their criteria, what they want to purchase, and then we connect them to essentially a very large network of project developers and suppliers that can respond to those proposals and submit offers. As you may imagine, through that process, we collect a lot of valuable information that's beyond what is available on registry. That could be transaction data, specifically volume price information, as well as additional information on suppliers and projects that are not yet hit registry themselves. We leverage that, and I'll kind of tackle how this is important in addressing some of the comments that Ryan suggested on the quality of the inputs and outputs for AI applicability. Very briefly on Abatable before I dive into how we leverage AI. We founded the company in 2021. So a recent player. We have already transacted roughly 52 million tons in the market, serviced over 200 corporates. It's not a name that often gets associated with AI, Abatable. We've not taken a lot of projects on this, but recently we have taken the deliberate decision to resource an effort specifically in hiring a team that looks at this topic on a dedicated fashion. We are really excited to leverage some of the valuable transaction infrastructure and data we have. And also, to be honest, it's been quite a leapfrogging in terms of the commercial models and how some of these are now becoming incredibly accessible to companies like ourselves. In terms of how we work with AI, how we apply AI, I would say, as I alluded to in the intro, a lot of what we are excited to do is leveraging some of the data layers that we have in addition to what the registry infrastructure offers. And we also leverage a lot of the information that exists in existing registry information, such as existing PDFs document, some of the Excels that do exist, as well as just simply web page information that's available from suppliers themselves. And we do use AI by leveraging vectorization and large language models with optical character recognition, so OCR techniques. And it's predominantly to put it simply, it's very much looking at a PDF, organizing the data. We do chunk some of that data, and that's easy for us to query and kind of prompt and ask questions on. So this has been particularly helpful for us in things like, more recently, the decision of the ICVCM to put forward projects with a CCP label that have very specific carbon emission factors and FNRV values. So that's the kind of information that's not available currently in the registry infrastructure, but it's important. And as we kind of extract that data, tag it, if you will, and then that offers a really interesting data layer for then buyers to then make decisions on. I kind of want to stress the comment Diego provided, which is, this always needs to be a human in the loop. In fact, one of the things that we've noticed is that some of these techniques, we only get to 90% accuracy. And if we want to build true trust in the market and have something that's incredibly actionable and trusted by corporate buyers, there's always needs to be an element of human checking and kind of getting to a level of accuracy that's closer to 100% over time. But certainly the advantage of some of these for us is we're reducing a lot of the manual labor and team time in getting to those questions and answers very quickly. So we're really getting to some of those in minutes and no longer days or hours if we were to go back to a developer and cross-check some of those information. So that's on maybe the one thing I wanted to mention, predominantly on kind of how we leverage some of the data that we have. The other thing that we've started to experiment internally that's quite interesting and we're really excited about is how we train some of the existing commercial models that do exist out there, such as Claude or ChatGPT, and how we train them on proprietary frameworks. And what I mean by proprietary frameworks are things like what is the Abatable team understanding of political risk, and how can we leverage existing raw data that exists, for example, policy documents or regulation, and then try to query the document with structured output that do provide a lens on risk and interpretability that's important and has been vetted from our team's expertise. Policy is just one example of how we do that. So we've really developed this internal project whereby some of our commercial models are used in speeding that process of interpretability. There's always ultimately a human in the loop, but that's certainly fastened our interpretation of some of the very complicated carbon policy documents. And then the other thing that we are starting to experiment on is anything related to news sentiment analysis, and particularly in how we understand counterparty risk. So for example, some suppliers do have quite a lot of sparse information on the web about themselves and affiliations with other companies. So there's an element of trying to leverage some of these models to get us some news and what is the sentiment around that news. And we've proven some of these models to be working quite nicely. So those are kind of two elements I wanted to provide as examples of some of the internal projects we're working on and how we're really excited to continue leveraging AI for scalability and efficiency, but also continue to have human oversight, look into some of the biases that might have been introduced to some of these tools.
All
Kyle,
right.
let me pause here and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, I think that's a perfect segue actually to our next speaker, especially as you talk about kind of the lack of data that's available to buyers. Mark, I know that that's something you're closely focused on. So without any further delay, we'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle, and thanks to IETA and the rest of the membership for having us here today. Just a quick introduction to CNaught. We provide diversified portfolios of high integrity carbon credits to corporate buyers looking to address their residual greenhouse gas emissions. So we are purchasing carbon credits from developers from different sources, and then we bundle them into portfolios and then provide them on a portfolio basis to our customers. And before I get into the next slide, what I thought I'd do is take a bit of a different approach and just present sort of like the problems that we see in the industry, and then where we see the opportunities and how we're addressing them, and then specifically how we're using AI to address some of those problems. So Kyle, if you want to flip to the next slide. Next slide from here. I mean, for us, CNaught, we only focus on the voluntary carbon market, right? So, and we believe that the biggest challenge facing the voluntary carbon market is, frankly, it's lack of buyers, right? There are millions of companies and organizations out there that should be engaging in the voluntary carbon market, and the number of folks listed in the registries that are actively purchasing directly is on the order of thousands. And there are a number of challenges to that, and what we present here right here on this slide is a key piece of that, right? It's complicated. Folks have no idea what to purchase. There are tens of thousands of projects, there are dozens of registries, over 100 different methodologies, and the folks making these decisions primarily within corporations have little time and little expertise, right? For the average person in sustainability, it's the first time they've been in a sustainability role. Very few people were performing sustainability, 5 or 10 years ago, never mind even looking at carbon projects. And so the folks that are making these decisions do not know how to assess all the data, the increasing amount of data that's out there, right? The solutions that we've heard about today from CarbonAi or Planet or Pachama, it's great. I mean, more data is helpful. It does help to bring transparency and increase trust to the decision making. But one of the chief challenges that we believe that our buyers have, or the potential buyers of voluntary carbon credits, is that they don't know how to assess it. And so it is a true challenge. And so next slide, Kyle. Sorry, yeah, perfect. So what we're trying to do is to help buyers along that journey and handle it end to end, right? What does that mean? When it comes to purchasing the carbon credits, first you have to start off with defining a strategy, right? Like, how are you going to go about purchasing credits? What are you looking to do with your carbon procurement process? For us at CNaught, we follow an asset allocation model very much built off of Oxford's net zero principles. And so we're breaking projects down by category, by Oxford category. Then we look at specific methodologies. We try to diversify by both, not both, but category, methodology, geography, vintage, etc. And then within those categories, we're then performing the due diligence to choose the projects themselves, right? Relying on a lot of the data that was mentioned today. We also work with the ratings agencies. I saw there's a question about ratings agencies and their role in AI. Been incredibly helpful there, but there is, at the end of the day, a lot of value in both using AI to sort through the tens of thousands of projects, at least at a high level, to filter down so that, as many folks here have mentioned, so that a human can make the decision at the end of the day, but that you're not filtering through, 10, 20, 30,000 different projects. Then there's the act of actually procuring those credits. As many of the folks on this call probably are well aware, it's one thing to say, oh, okay, this is a great project I want credits from. Where do you go get it? Like, where is that supply? And today it's a fairly manual process of not only understanding where that inventory is, but then the actual transaction itself, working with the registry, getting an account on the registry, and then going through the manual process of logging into the different platforms out there and retiring the credits, right? And then what's becoming increasingly more complicated is the reporting element. At least here in the US, particularly in California, we have AB 1305, which is mandating that you have to report out on all the carbon credits that you're using to make environmental claims. Of course, there's CDP and CSRD globally as well. And so we at CNaught are addressing all of these problems for our corporate buyers, and in several different spots along this sort of value chain, we're deploying AI to automate and make some of those problems a little bit more handleable, manageable. Kyle, if you can go to the next slide. So I wanted to dig into a few specific examples of where we see the opportunity to use AI to address some of these challenges. It really comes down to, what's new in AI, right? AI has been around for, 30, 40 years, but really the rise of generative AI over the past few years has really become possible because of deep learning and this like sort of enormous increase in capability for pattern matching, right? And that pattern matching really results in, I think, at least 3 different areas, benefits that has applications for the problems that we're looking at today. The first one is judgment, right? How do you go through the 10 to 30,000 different projects out there and filter down to what is more likely to be high quality, right? For certain methodologies, there are just particular variables that you want to look at. If you're looking at landfill gas projects, as an example, you might want to look at the oxidation rates that are, assumptions that are in the project. If you're looking at biochar projects or cook stove projects, you want to look at what's the FNRRB values that are being assumed by the project. Now, it's one thing to know that and have the expertise to go in there and look at it. It's another one to be able to apply AI to actually understand that those are the relevant variables, right? To look through the 200, 300 pages of a PDD and understand that those are the values that are important. The other piece is, again, focusing on the buyers, because that's where we see the biggest challenge in the marketplace is how do you build that confidence and trust with the buyers and not inundate them with information about a project that it may be irrelevant, right? How do they know what is important? There is a regulation change in Indonesia. Is that important, or is that to an owner of credit, somebody who's made a claim based on credits that they've already retired, or is it only useful for potential buyers of new credits to be issued from that particular region, right? Again, somebody who has 5 hours in a year to look at carbon credits doesn't know how to make that judgment, whereas humans can, experts can, but also AI can help filter that down as well. A lot of work to be done on automation. In January, we announced a relationship with OpenAI, where ChatGPT Operator, it's a computer use agent, can automatically purchase carbon credits from the CNaught platform on behalf of users, on behalf of consumers, for any transaction that they make, right? So ChatGPT Operator can, order DoorDash for you, can book that flight on Kayak for you, but then also calculate the carbon emissions from that transaction and directly purchase it from CNaught. We don't have to build an API specifically for any of those applications, right? You can use these LLMs to loosely couple platforms together that haven't been connected before. Again, lowering the barrier to entry for that marginal buyer. And then, small fun things that one example that we just recently implemented is, we create impact pages for each of our buyers, so that after they purchase a portfolio, they have a public page that they can share with their key stakeholders that allow them to share what they've done and specifically what projects they've purchased, etc. They want to, oftentimes co-brand this or brand it in their own color scheme and their own logo, etc. And we can automatically fetch that, calculate their corporate colors using AI, and then automatically rebrand it. Again, just lowering that barrier for people to adopt the solution and share it with others. And then finally, there's a lot of progress to be made around translation. I don't just mean language translation, although that is helpful when many PDDs are written in Spanish and Portuguese, and we have scanned documents. But there's this multimodal element to it, where can you ingest video and text and photo data and then translate it into the data that we actually need to be able to run deep learning off it. But also particularly going the opposite direction and translating the hard data that many people have that are baked into CSVs, and then turn it into prose, which you can then submit into CDP, into your AB 1305 reports, into your annual sustainability reporting, right? Because again, at the end of the day, the primary buyer within an organization may be a chief sustainability officer that should be spending most of their time working on, decarbonization strategy and planning and execution, and not on the carbon, procurement process or the reporting element, which today is taking, dozens of hours per year. So we're working on solutions across all of these different pieces. Are really excited about what the future may bring. I'll just echo and wrap with some of the other comments made earlier, saying that there is a huge role to be played still for the human, in to keep the human in the loop, but AI has a huge role to play in really simplifying and bringing down the amount of time that folks need to be spending on this problem.
Mark, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And we do have lots of good questions rolling in. There's one that Mark mentioned in the chat here, which is, what role do you think AI is going to play in the rating agencies? Have rating agencies in the space taken a very important role in the value of the credits? If yes, how AI will impact the space? Any Any thoughts on that, Mark, or did anybody else want to take that? We've got a number of questions here in the Q&A that we won't have a chance to get to. We've just got a couple minutes left here, so.
Yeah, just really briefly, I mean, I can't speak to how much the ratings agencies are using AI internally. I'm sure they are, as is everybody. But again, I believe that there is incredible amount of value in combining any AI solution with an additional level of human expertise. And I think the big constraint for ratings agencies is coverage, right? Even the largest ones only have a few hundred projects covered, maybe even 1,000 projects covered. And that's not with regards to specific vintages of projects. And so, the more we can use AI in combination with the immense levels of expertise that are embedded in the agencies themselves to be able to cover more projects, the better.
Thanks, Mark. I'm seeing a question here as well for Ryan, and Ryan and David have been kind of active in the Q&A, answering questions as they come in, but I'm actually not sure if all of our attendees can see those questions being answered. But Ryan, the question to you was, are your AI monitoring tools acceptable to the scheme-specific third-party assessors, and what costs do they carry? Is there anything you wanted to say to that? Do we still have Ryan? Well, maybe we can pivot to David. David, you've got a number of questions here in the Q&A. So one of them was, which registries are already using your satellite data for monitoring project success? And I know you put a strong answer here, but again, I'm just not sure that everybody can actually see the answers. So
Yeah, I
I
can
don't know
quickly
if Dave.
recap that. Yeah, if you go to the Q&A box and then go to answered, you should be able to see that. But if folks who can't pull that up, so to the registry or standards bodies question, so traditionally they do not actually conduct monitoring of the projects that are registered, with the registry or under the methodologies that they produce. This kind of falls to the developers and the VVBs, the validation and verification bodies, to do that assessment and monitoring of the projects. This is beginning to change with new entrants like Isometric, who will take that on themselves. But we are talking with a number of developers and as well as the BBBs about the use of our data as part of their workflows. Unfortunately, the majority of the methodologies actually prohibit the use of satellite remote sensing data that are out there. Fortunately, this is also beginning to change. There are newer ones coming out that do permit the use of this in some aspects. There's not quite yet any that have end-to-end use of these products, but it's starting to change. We're seeing more and more of this being allowed. And so we are working to see how this data can be integrated in those types of methodologies. But we are separately also working with registries and standards bodies like BERA to figure out how to be informing their new methodologies coming out to allow the use of these data for assessment and monitoring. So both the kind of traditional standards bodies and the newer entrants are all kind of moving this direction. And myself, folks like Diego, and others from kind of the data producer side are all engaging to try to bring this, to fruition faster.
Thanks, David. I think we've got time for maybe one more question. I see there are a few from Tobias in the Q&A. So will there be methodologies for Article 6.4 that can use satellite data for a baseline forecast and project monitoring? Who will cover the cost? And to David, Tobias also asked, are you working on including satellite monitoring in new methodologies for 6.4? And this will be our last question. If anyone wants to take it. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure thing. Just briefly on 6.4, we've been following this for a number of years, and kind of in wait and see mode to see how this kind of all plays out, and focus primarily on the voluntary market so far. That said, we would love to, begin working on this type of methodology and inclusion of imagery in there. And so, we're open to doing so, but aren't actively engaged at the moment.
Thanks, David. And any other thoughts from our speakers about the question on Article 6.4 before we wrap here? Well,
Throw a thought in for you, Kyle, if you want.
Sorry,
Sorry, my
what's
mic
that?
was
Yeah, go ahead.
mic was off earlier when I was trying to answer your question. For us, like my personal viewpoint and us at CarbonAi is and there's a lot of coverage here on satellite data, and we love satellite data. It's highly auditable, and there's a lot of application on things that aren't available on satellite data or secondary data sources that are auditable on other project types. And a lot of that's going to flow into 6.4 and 6.2, candidly, is what we think is important to focus on is the full data value chain from primary data and secondary data all the way through to your environmental attributes and the traceability of that information from start to finish. So when we talk about the applicability of certain monitoring types into 6.2 or 6.4, I think there's going to be wide reach for products like David's in those markets, but that isn't the only data source. And there needs to be traceability from source data providers like Planet and others, along with all the other information and the human collected data. And that gets overlooked a lot of the time where what are human beings collecting in the field, and how do you make sure that's auditable and traceable, overlaid on top of all the sensor data and satellite data that we're covering. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks very much, Ryan. Wish we could take more questions. Unfortunately, we are past the top of the hour. So Mark, Maria, Diego, David, and Ryan, thank you very, very much for making the time today. Thanks to our IETA events team for helping to make this happen as usual. And if anyone is at European Climate Summit week after next in Lisbon, we'll be there and we're hoping to see you there. So please reach out and do let us know. Thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.